Non-duality part 2. Conclusion. Meditation, another choice. Yoga, another choice. The drugs, those are big here in Seattle, Washington. They want legal chemical options besides alcohol. And alcohol and boredom, small amounts like marijuana, a little glass of wine, for people like me, okay. But for someone who's had an addiction already and they're not willing to have a mind, body, and brain in the world to be free to drink a beer, smoke a cigar once in a while if they've got a smoking addiction, small amounts. Go to places like AA and meet up with people and have rituals, have, arguably cult-like practices to stop. Therapies also, other choices, just going to a psychotherapist. And there's about as much duality there as my fingers, because the duality has to do with that person in the middle who still likes a beer once in a while, who's, able to maintain healthy standards. But the person, kind of like proselytizes sometimes, like the Mormons used to do in Arizona. They come and, say like, here's a Mormon Bible, will you consider Joseph Smith? Will you, join our spiritual tradition? And there's non-duality for the people that are just, they're just done with the stuff because they enjoy life, unaltered. Nobody can really say, like, talking about non-duality, not all the other stuff that's been, talked about in other videos, but specifically non-duality. It's like, well, if you're gonna, get too frustrated and demanding, then you're not in non-duality anymore. There's no Advaita Vedanta, no direct path. There's a set plan, there's preset, robot-like behavior for a person to do around those people. But when a person gets into their home, like an ashram, if they have one, into their own, home world, as a part of the larger world, then they're in the sanctity and the privacy of a sacred place, for most parts of the world. Here in the United States of America, we thankfully have not yet totally lost our home when we have it. People may, run around hallways, hit walls, and prevent heat, but there's stuff like blankets, long sleeve shirts, dream catchers to put on the heater button so it doesn't get sad when you see it and cause an emotion. And there's philosophy for a person to, help them with the, emotion of worry, listening, voyeurism, creepiness, meanness, and hostility. Philosophy like non-duality and being able to formulate, theorize, and make sense not only of the world, but of everything, Stephen Hawking said, in the movie, the theory of everything. Your theory of everything, Stephen Hawking's theory of everything, and I'm sure some of his writings, except, I haven't got into his work much so far, but I do remember the movie that they did about him, The Theory of Everything, and thought it was pretty because the theory of everything really, I think, helps give a better perspective of suffering and lets non-duality really, 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 really drop the body and the mind and the brain down towards just a sense of peace and being. And for a long time they said being and mind, and it was the mind-body problem, the mind and the body, because you could get down to the bottom and, really have a good, heart rate, breathing, and just peace and relaxation, and then someone knocks on the door and your mind goes. Whereas nowadays, with neuroscience going forward, they're talking more about the brain and the body, and the mind and the brain and the body. Having the brain more cognitive, metacognitive, sharpens the senses. It makes awareness better. It makes attention nice and calm and relaxed and not so. And the sounds much more natural. Whereas the mind doesn't get food, doesn't get, talked about in anatomy, and, doesn't get what the body does. So the duality between the two has to do with feeding the body mostly, and not feeding the mind, except feeding the mind with the brain. And there's where the non-duality occurs, because the brain needs energy. So you feed the body through the mouth, you feed the body, through an injection if you're in the hospital and you can't eat. And it goes through and it goes up. But when you get to mind, then it gets kind of psychedelic, like, whoa, is the, mind invisible and doesn't need food? And that's where it gets to be just kind of a long thought, it gets to be a philosophical, journey. But the non-duality and the theory of everything help with boredom. Getting bored, looking off. Not feeling in danger in your home like in an ashram, because it's so relaxing and peaceful and enlightening. and be able to say something like, well, the theory of everything has to do with energy. We're energy, outer space is energy. As far as we can see is energy, and as far as we can come inwards, we are energy. And consciousness comes from the energy. And then it's not like the mind body with God and Buddha and Jesus and Allah. And Muhammad. And more about what the brain can understand, what the brain can see and know and learn. Whereas, similar to the mind and the body, Buddha, Allah, Jesus, Muhammad, are God. They are, in some traditions, Lord Buddha, but notions similar to God. And then you have to figure out where to find God, how to learn about God, how to see God, how to understand God. But energy you can find in a telescope. You can find on the roof of a building like we have here now at this location in Seattle, Washington. And with the energy, you have a conscious image of everything. Death will help the earth grow. Death will be neutral. And death will be like the mind. Given praise, given love, funerals, the dark sky will be a star suddenly with light and water and food. And maybe animals and maybe people. And the consciousness and the energy are like the hand moving. And then you have what you need. We're floating in outer space on planet Earth. Full of energy, full of consciousness. And can just enjoy the ride. And can just enjoy the float, the gravity, the planet. The end.